Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rigo Garcia. I'm one of the solution architect managers within our partner organization, and I have Peter here with me. Peter, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Peter O'Donoghue. I'm VP of Application Services within Unisys Federal, and we're going to talk about building out a cloud center of enablement.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started, right?
So we chose that I would disappear. I was going to go Andrew Ridgeley style with a tambourine, but we're going to leave Rigo alone for half an hour. So I'll be back up in a second.
More or less, yep. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about laying the groundwork for change, right? And what does that look like for your cloud journey? Also, when we talk about cloud culture and starting at the top, why does it have to start at the top, right? Why not my innovation team or my R&D team? Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. When I was putting this deck together, these are some of the related breakouts that I think might be of interest to you. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., if you want to take a look at the Voice of the Partner panel discussion, check that out. Also, I'm part of the partner organization, and also our partner development managers and sales leadership will be right outside as we finish this session. In case you have any questions, myself and Peter will make ourselves available as well. So I'd like to start with just a very simple question, right? How adaptable to change is your organization? You see, when I take a look at these first two lines, when I see the strongest and the most intelligent, to me that's a reflection of kind of what has been achieved, right? You became the strongest, you became the most intelligent, you kind of acquired that knowledge. But the one of these characteristics that really can outlast anyone in this room is the third one, right? Being able to adapt to change, and that's the long-term strategy, right? That's what's going to allow you to adapt to the ever-changing needs of your customers. That's going to help you adapt to your security requirements, your new compliance requirements that you have to adhere to, right? What if a new player or an existing competitor enters your marketplace, right? That's your ability to change. And you see, today, how would you remain the strongest? How would you remain the most intelligent, right, in what you do? So typically what ends up happening is that there's a lot of really good reasons to change, right? There's all these business drivers, but it's not just one of them. It's not just, hey, I want to get faster to market. I want to get faster to market, and I also want to get closer to my customers, right? And I want to lower my business risk, and I want to increase profits, right? So how are we supposed to keep up with all this change? We have to get really good. We got to master the skill of adapting, right? So throughout my career, and here with AWS, there's typically two strategies that I see, most organizations, leverage to take on change. The first one looks like this, right? Now, make no mistake, there's a strategy behind this, right? To come out in one piece, right? And there's even some tactical items under that strategy, which is to run fast. And this guy is wearing tennis shoes, not even cowboy boots, right? But we have to, the picture is pretty clear, right? This guy is reacting to changes, right? He really doesn't have a lot of control. So what I'll propose is that we have a different strategy to be more like this guy, right? To proactively and consciously make the decision to jump in that car and get behind the wheel and start driving, right? Driving the change, being the disruptor to all the other drivers in the racetrack, right? Now, how is he going to do that? First of all, just like all of you guys, he's got a ton of horsepower at his fingertips ready to use, right? You have the AWS Cloud Platform to do that. So there's a lot of engineering that went into building that car, into building that machine. He's going to study that. He's going to learn how to use it. And he didn't just wake up one day and say, I have a driver's license, I'm ready to go, right? He's no Formula One race driver just yet. He has to practice, he has to get in the racetrack, take it for a few laps, learn how to hug that curve just right, and just keep practicing, right? So he's got a plan, but he can't do it alone. He needs a team, right? He needs his crew that's going to feed him information. Every time he goes through the lap, they're going to tell him how he's doing. They're going to pivot, right? They're going to adapt. He needs all these specialized skills for these guys to be able to change all those 4 tires in under 2 seconds, right? So that he can go fast. So if you want to drive your cloud strategy, you need a team, right? And that team is your cloud center of excellence. This is how you're going to get behind the wheel and drive your cloud adoption. Your CCOE is your foundation, is what's going to help you lay the groundwork for change. So I know many of you may already have a cloud center of excellence, or maybe a team that resembles a cloud center of excellence, right? And that's okay. Step number 1 is done. But what I want you to take away from this session is that it has to be well balanced, right? You have to have a methodology for evaluating your cloud center of excellence to make sure that it's being proactive, right? That it's not just reacting to the change. That it's going to be able to continue to deliver value, and it's going to have the right resources, right? Funding can help sometimes. And it's going to have the right authority to make an impact and bring value to your customers. So just real quick, let me take a step back and talk about the definition of cloud center of excellence, right? So kind of in my own words, you can read the definition up here. It's a cross-functional team that's going to help you establish your cloud guardrails, right? It's going to help establish a controlled and repeatable mechanism for the rest of your organization to follow and adopt your cloud strategy, right? Depending on the size and the scope of your cloud adoption, your CCOE may have some of these folks helping out, right? You'll need an executive sponsor, perhaps your alliances lead that understands and has the relationship with AWS, as well as other partners, right, in your ecosystem. Technical folks that know how to design, run, deploy the architecture. Some folks on the business side, right? How are we going to pay for the resources that we're consuming? How are we going to sell those resources if you're a service provider, right? Security and legal to keep you out of trouble. Notice that all of these roles, they don't have to be all full-time, right? Some of them may be able to be more of a part-time kind of engagement. And each of these roles is an input and an output to your cloud center of excellence. They're bringing expertise, things that they really know how to do really well, into your cloud center of excellence. They're learning those and sending them out to the field. Now, typically when I have this conversation with my partners, it all kind of makes sense, right? We need a team. We may already have a team. But what exactly do we do when we meet, right? So the role of the CCOE is both advisory and prescriptive. So your CCOE is going to help you establish a roadmap, and it's going to help you drive that initiative. It's going to help you make sure that it doesn't just stay on paper, right? It's going to find a sponsor. It's going to solicit the help from the business, from the folks that are going to benefit from that initiative, and it's going to drive the initiative. It's going to help with the technology selection. It's going to work with the alliance manager, and it's going to look at the community of tools that you guys have, and it's going to start creating reference architectures. How am I going to use those tools in the cloud? Perhaps I need to replace the tool. Maybe the ones I have work just fine, right? It's also going to help enable best practices, but it's not just going to learn about the well-architected framework, the concept of the immutable infrastructure, and just stay there, right? It's actually going to help have a ripple effect throughout your organization by conducting those reviews, a well-architected review as part of your process, as part of adopting cloud. Kind of, teaching the others how to fish, right? The important thing here is that your CCOE doesn't just do it all, right? Everything cloud goes to a CCOE. That's not the case. The CCOE is going to help you move the ball down the field. It's going to keep things moving. It's going to help incubate and jumpstart your initiatives at the right pace for your organization, right? Because they're inside your organization. They know the processes, the culture, and they're going to help you adapt accordingly, right? This is a continuous cycle. So what I'd like to introduce is our Cloud Center of Excellence framework. Our CCOE framework, you can think of these 4 sections as kind of the advisory role of your Cloud Center of Excellence, right? These are the perspectives that your CCOE needs to have and take into consideration to drive forward your initiatives. It's like a chair, right? It's got to have 4 legs, and all of those legs have to be about the same length, right? It'd be a little uncomfortable to sit in kind of a 3-legged chair. So each of these advisory things that the CCOE does is to discover all the tactical items, how we're going to do this, how we're going to actually adopt the cloud or move this initiative forward, right? This is the proactive portion of it. So as an example, an offering. And an offering is both for service providers as well as, if you're in IT, you're providing some type of service, right? To your internal customers or your external customers. So if you're going to offer something, do you have to charge for it? Who's going to pay for it? Maybe you have to charge back your customer. Maybe you just have to show them the utilization. And what's the right level? What is your customer expecting to see? Is it just kind of a one-line item? Okay, the cloud. Or is it a breakdown of the consumption of each of those services? Right? Is it real time? Is it once a month? So you have to think about what it is that you're offering and how your customer, internal or external, is going to receive that, right? Similarly, if you're offering something, if you're doing something for your customers, and I believe everyone in this room is doing something, how do your customers know that you are offering that service? Again, whether you're internal or external, you have to let them know is your marketing strategy, right? How are they going to procure your services? If you're looking at it from an external standpoint, right, the path to procurement, maybe a contract vehicle, right? Because that may shape what services, can I actually use that service that I'm building in the back? If my path to procurement is correct, it has to align, right, end to end. And, as an example, if you're able to spin up a virtual machine, an EC2 instance, with a few clicks in a few minutes, but your process, your path to procurement is slow, then that's going to impact, right, your operational excellence. If that takes a long time, then it's not going to meet the expectations. So that's where the governance enters into place, right? Can we provide our customers with the right governance, with the right cloud guardrails, so that they can self-serve or provide a better customer experience, right? Perhaps we need to leverage automation to increase this customer experience. As you reach scale, how do we reduce our costs, right? And a lot of this is, a bit of the art of the possible. So you need knowledge. You need the industry knowledge that you already have. You need to understand, talk to your AWS account manager, talk to your AWS partner development manager, and see what kind of programs are available from AWS to help me in this journey, to help me in this initiative, right? There's the business and the technical enablement, traditional digital training, classroom-based training, immersion days, game days. And then you take that training and just to draw the parallel back to my race driver at the beginning, you take it for a lap. You start building POCs, you pilot what you learn, you create a sandbox, and then you realize the benefits, right? You put this into production. So what I want to do, typically when you have a CCOE, there's some well-known activities that the CCOE can do, right, as part of your AWS cloud journey. And I'm going to cover those. And what I want to do is I want to overlay this framework over those activities to kind of show the how, right? The how are we going to do this? So one of the typical activities for the CCOE is to help define the AWS account strategy. So when we overlay this and we start to run it through this framework, just for the purposes of this presentation, let's start with knowledge, right? So we figure out, okay, do I have the right knowledge? Do I understand what an AWS account is? How's that different from a virtual private cloud or VPC? When do I use one versus the other, right? As you build that knowledge, then you get into the details, right? You put hands on keyboard and you figure out, okay, you start to gain experience of actually doing it, right? You create your first AWS organization, you create some AWS accounts under that, start spinning up some VPCs. And then you start to figure out, what does this offering look like for my customer? How am I going to manage the costs? Maybe does it make sense to have multiple master payers or have it all in one? It depends on your customers, right? Then we run that through operational excellence and said, okay, we were able to do a few of these manually by clicking. How do we get operationally excellent at this? Well, let's create some naming standards. Let's define a security baseline that we're going to be able to carry throughout all of the other accounts that you create, right? So similarly, some of the other activities, we can do the same thing, right? One of the other activities that the CCOE, it's supposed to help your organization is to evangelize and train. So this quickly falls in knowledge, right? Creating some lunch and learns, helping the organization get up to speed from a learning standpoint. But we could take that, celebrate and socialize wins, and use that as our marketing, right? As part of our offering, and say, this is how people know that we're doing this and we're being successful at evangelizing and training, right? It can't just stay in the knowledge area. It has to keep on going on that cycle, right? Security and compliance, right? Certainly learn about the services, learn about the features, then get into the details and the power and all the inherent controls that you can achieve by leveraging the AWS platform. Gain that experience. If you're a central IT organization and you want to develop, a model of a kind of a shared services, perhaps you got to start with some knowledge and learning about VPCs, the different tools that are available, and then define what am I going to offer the rest of the organization, right? Maybe you have to define that as a service catalog, or it will be helpful, right? As you run it through the cycle again, the operational excellence, we just figure out what's next. Continuous improvement, right? So that falls in the operational excellence. Just one of the items here, keeping your reference architectures, put it on the calendar, right? How often do you update your reference architectures? So to illustrate this framework just a little bit more, I'm going to run through 2 examples, then I'm going to hand it over to Peter. So the first example is from the perspective of an enterprise or an organization, kind of internal IT, right? So you set up your regular cadence, right? Your meetings, your Cloud Center of Excellence, they're in a room. And then the IT manager comes by and says, hey, I've heard that you can do backups in the cloud. Is that true? Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we get you some knowledge? Why don't we train you and help you learn about services like Amazon S3, AWS Storage Gateway, so that we all have a common level of understanding, right? Notice that it's not just, let me do that for you, right? It's actually, let me help you learn, and let's do it together, right? So get that knowledge to the system administrators, the backup operators, the guys that are going to benefit and operate this thing, right, this initiative. That's how you have that ripple effect. So, okay, you get the knowledge. Then we move on to experience. Again, create a proof of concept, put hands on keyboard, create an S3 bucket, deploy an S3 gateway, storage gateway. And as part of that process, the CCOE is supposed to harvest those architectures. If this is the first time they see something like this, don't let it fall through the cracks. This can be a repeatable artifact that it can be used over and over again, right? So the CCOE will harvest that artifact. Then we start thinking about the offering. Again, back to the same example. Great, so I'm in IT, but how do we charge the internal organization? When they come with a new project, how do I budget for that, right? So maybe that's another cycle in training, right? How do I budget and train for the next project, right? When they say, I want this backup thing that you guys are developing, right? So again, you go through operational excellence, you gather some feedback, things are going well. I like how this guy's got his arms crossed. So he's like, I want disaster recovery, right? And I want to automate it. Like, yeah, cool, we can do that. What do we do? Again, what's the right level of knowledge? And this is where the CCOE can help tune things for your organization, right? That is relevant. It's not just training for the sake of training. It's relevant for the initiative, right? So maybe we should look at the capabilities of your backup tool, right? And we should look at things from CloudFormation. CloudFormation allows you to describe your environment in a programmatic way, so you can just push a button and your infrastructure gets deployed. So like, okay. So you get the training, you create some CloudFormation templates. Perhaps you didn't have a developer as part of your CCOE. So that's why having the ability to obtain resources, right? Whether it's just someone else in the organization, hiring someone, getting one of our partners, AWS partners, to help out, whatever the case is, you get that resource, you start experimenting with that, right? And now you're actually either creating a new service for your organization or enhancing the existing service, right? It's no longer just backup. Now it's backup and disaster recovery. And by the way, it's automated, right? And you just continue to run it through the cycle. So the second example here is from the perspective of an AWS partner, right? So let's say that this partner has a managed services provider practice, an MSP practice, and they want to do this for their AWS customers, right? So they come in, they talk to the CCOE, and they say, hey, we would like to do this in the cloud. We're already doing it. We've been doing it for the last 20 years. Great. As a matter of fact, we have a few AWS accounts that we're managing for our customers. Okay, well, let's run it through the operational excellence. So run it through the operational excellence. He said, well, we created these accounts manually. How do we get better at this? Because we're planning a go-to-market strategy, and we need to be ready, right? We need to be ready to deliver. So he said, okay, well, the services that will be relevant would be things like AWS landing zones and AWS control tower. All right, again, collectively, let's learn about these services. If the CCOE doesn't have the knowledge, reach out to your AWS account manager or your partner development manager. One of our solutions architects can help with this. Put hands on keyboard, deploy a few, understand the inner workings of the capabilities of the services. Again, harvest some architectures for your CCOE. And then you iterate your market, in this case, right, the go-to-market strategy goes all out. Okay, well, that's great. Now we're gaining scale, right? We're gaining scale. How do we turn the knob a little bit on better managing our costs? Okay, let's run some reports. There's this thing, the reports tell me something about reserved instances. What is this? Okay, well, let's get some knowledge. Let's buy a few, let's monitor, let's start practicing, right? Perhaps update your processes. Every so often, we need to look at resource utilization so that we can reduce our costs, right? And the result of that is that the overall cost of operating that business or that service is lower, right? And that is realized. So those are just a few examples, theoretical, right? I'm going to pass it on to Peter. He'll give you his experience in establishing a CCOE.
Thanks, Rigo. So I think Rigo has kind of beaten the drum on probably a really important point, right? And in my mind, actually, when you're at a conference like this, you can walk the halls and you can walk the booths, and actually, my experience is we're swimming in amazing technology, and actually the rate of change and the amount of new technology that comes across is kind of mind-boggling. But what I've found as I've kind of gotten a little bit more senior in my career is it's actually not really about the technology. It's really about the people. So let me tell you a little bit of a kind of a concrete use case then of my experience at Unisys and Unisys Federal. I came in December of 2016, and what I found when I got to Unisys, well, actually, let me just briefly kind of introduce you. My role within Unisys was, well, one of the key elements of my role is to really make the whole of our experience kind of greater than the sum of the parts, really to harness the innovation and the experience that we have and the people know-how to be able to make a better difference to our clients and to really kind of drive cloud adoption, but not just cloud adoption for cloud adoption's sake, but to actually to be able to achieve digital transformation, to be able to help civilian agencies build great digital experiences for their stakeholders, and actually be able to help the warfighter be able to make mission critical decisions in a more timely manner. So I came in December of 2016. And what I found at Unisys was actually really surprising. The first thing I think, well, the two things that I don't even have on here, was actually we'd already had about a couple of major examples where we were able to build in a lean startup. If anybody's read Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup, we're able to work with our clients to be able to experiment using Agile and DevOps, but as importantly, using cloud and cloud native features to be able to experiment, roll capabilities out to be able to make mission critical decisions for some of our critical homeland security customers. We'd already done that. We also, when I came, I don't think I was quite aware of the pride and the reality of the history that we have in terms of innovation. We actually led one of the first email migrations to the cloud. And actually that kind of spirit of being an innovator actually was really important to who we were and how we defined ourselves. We already had kind of captured lightning in a bottle. And actually when I got to Unisys, is we actually have a training program and frankly a commitment to investing in our human capital that actually is really surprising as a systems integrator. We actually have, I think at this point we've got, by the time I got here, I think we had hundreds of folks trained and certified with different AWS certifications. We had a very mature alliances program, and actually that's important in that I think Rigo talked about it in this last example is when you get stuck, you need to be able to reach out to the real practitioners. Blending our experience, blending the folks that what we've done in the field, and blending the commitment we've made to training, we actually had kind of the backbone of a core staff that could help us drive our future CCOE. But probably most important was, and actually this is actually I think this made everything kind of happen. Is my boss, who was the president of Federal, and his boss were absolutely committed to making sure that our workforce was ready to drive cloud adoption. And actually what we have found is actually the demand signal across all of our customers in Federal. Actually, most of our business in Federal, it's kind of interesting, Unisys brand isn't most obvious this way, but a lot of our business in Federal is actually helping continually modernize applications. Some of the applications actually are truly mission critical, and actually the security of the nation actually depends on some of the things that Unisys Federal does. And actually we've been in the business of continually modernizing those, and of course, like a lot of you who are here, who are probably sustaining and modernizing applications, it's almost invariable that you're going to move your applications to the cloud. And of course, when you're an applications person, you're not looking at moving to the cloud just because it's cool, but you're looking to be able to go faster and make a difference. My executives above me actually were committed to making sure that we were aware of the demand signal, and we wanted to not be, and actually a lot of systems integrators, we see this around the Beltway, at least historically, that we've seen SIs kind of be a victim of cloud adoption, and we wanted to lead it, right? So how do we do that? Recognize actually the demand signals for what they are, but probably more importantly, recognize that we already had embraced some of the key enablers, which is a holistic approach to retooling our workforce to be able to be cloud leaders. And actually, so we built out a cloud center. We call it a cloud center of enablement, actually, is just a nitpicky thing. But so what do we do? So we recognized, as I said earlier, we fused this idea of being able to build armies of cloud practitioners with recognizing that we needed to kind of establish a core team that understood what was actually what was relevant to cloud adoption. So we focused on things. Actually, Rigo talked about it. So he provided 2 examples. But as we find people moving to the cloud, they have issues with, understanding their portfolio, understanding how to migrate, But actually, once you get into the cloud, and particularly with the public cloud providers like AWS, you have to know those environments from top to bottom, and you have to know how to establish account strategies and how to pay for the cloud and how to manage the financials. And actually, for federal customers, one of the things that we've run into and we've been able to help our customers is how to deal with things like the Anti-Deficiency Act and how to make sure that your funding is always, so as I can keep going through things like, all the things that we've done in terms of service management, in terms of how do I do backup and recovery, how do I do IT operations, how do I integrate with my cyber operations organization, how do I do incident management, how do I manage even things like logging, all those kind of mechanical things that we've been doing in data centers. We need to kind of reimagine what that looks like in a cloud native context. And we established a core team that became our CCOE, and it was really kind of lived at that nexus of that connection between the folks that we've trained and certified, and actually a core team that were able to establish a set of engineering standards, engineering policies, and engineering practices. So when we talk about the cloud, we talk about everything as code, right? And Rigo in his wheel, actually one of his segments in the wheel was this concept of knowledge. One of the things you can do actually with the cloud is actually you can encapsulate knowledge itself as code, and you can templatize that. And actually that's one of those kind of hidden things that we've been able to latch onto. So by having the right folks with the right certifications and frankly the right experience, and actually frankly having made some of the right or wrong mistakes, we're able to declare, not only are we going to define like an SOP or a procedure as to how to adopt cloud or how to govern cloud, but you can encapsulate that as a deployable template. So a large part of our focus was encapsulating our knowledge, establishing those as deployable templates, coming up with a way to build a virtuous cycle so that our core team could get out to program teams and actually build to be able to introduce those templates on a program, test them out, actually kind of refactor them as necessary, but also to be able to kind of land and expand and have the program teams get their arms around these templates and actually use them and kind of continually improve them. So that way, anybody who participates in a consulting organization, a systems integration organization will know that the programs are where the work gets done. And actually you need to come up with a way to scalably kind of create knowledge, nurture knowledge, curate knowledge, have it go out to the field, have that knowledge be implemented, actually be improved, and I could continuously have it come back around and around. And actually within a systems integrator, that's actually a really important part of what we've done. Some elements here that I think is probably worth foot stomping would be around focusing on governance and control. Actually stated another way, I would say a governing principle that we've always adopted is this idea of we absolutely take DevOps deadly seriously. We're not looking to take kind of like a classic waterfall, data center service management approach and refactor it on the cloud. That's not at all what we've been doing. Actually, a lot of what AWS does, actually, if you're really engaging with them, is actually how they define what a managed service provider is for cloud native. Has a heavy focus on DevOps, and actually that was a core principle that we've baked in. So what that means in real terms is as we templatize those engineering standards, actually we put the necessary hooks in there to actually make sure that you can't go too far awry, right? So we want to make sure that you're not going to leave things open and unencrypted, and making sure that people can kind of traffic that from sites that aren't necessarily secure can get in and actually kind of wreak havoc with your environments. Instead of that being a written policy, we've templatized a lot of that. Actually, an important point here too is this: don't burden the CCOE with operations. I would say that the broader point is actually don't burden the CCOE with anything other than being a CCOE, or at least try to minimize that. Because it's very easy, as systems integrators, we tend to have, it's not a huge profit margin business, so consequently making investment and sustaining the investment is critical. So the CCOE is really about the establishment of knowledge, the curation of knowledge, the dissemination of that knowledge, and the continuous improvement and elaboration of that knowledge. If you actually say, well, our ops team is actually going to be the CCOE, what quickly happens is the ops team just does ops, because I got to keep my stuff up and running, and I want to make sure that the next outage is going to be prevented, and actually that's how ops folks think. Same is true with engineers, actually. The CCOE, a large part of the focus is to invest in it and to sustain it, to make sure that it's really about knowledge capture, dissemination. We found that there isn't one technology that solves every problem. I would be willing to bet that if you walk the floor and the coolest, shiniest tool that you find today will probably have evolved massively in 5 years. Some of the tools actually won't even exist in 5 years. Actually, they'll be completely bought, or it'll be a feature set, a native feature set of AWS themselves. So what we find is the knowledge and knowing what to look for, and the practices and the automation is more important than the specific tool, although in some instances tools are really important. And actually, don't forget to measure or frankly celebrate success. So as we've done really interesting things, actually a large part of what you're trying to do is actually, I think anybody who's in industry will know that number one challenge for all of us who actually serve the federal government or serve state and local as a systems integrator or a managed service provider is our human resources, our people, right? And we're all in a battle for human resources. We find that the CCOE and the training pathways is a really important way to actually keep people motivated, and actually with those successes, with great uptime, with great delivery, with great kind of time to deploy metrics, et cetera, being able to make sure people are recognized is absolutely critical. And let me have a look here. Okay, so I think I'm kind of watching my time here. So in my time at Unisys, actually what we've done is a lot of what we've been able to do is encapsulate and harness our people, which is actually kind of manifest as our CCOE, and we've established a next generation managed service provider offering. We call it Cloud Forte. I'm absolutely not going to do a pitch for you here about Cloud Forte, but what I can tell you is, first of all, it looks like a wheel, which looks like Rigo's wheel, and actually some of the key elements are, it kind of embeds this idea of offering, knowledge, experience. But you can see at the center of all this stuff is this Cloud Center of Excellence, or CCOE, or enablement, depending on the context. In our situation, it really is having the right resources and having the right investment so that knowledge is curated and captured. And actually, what we found is that the templates that you can define, like even basic things like how do I go to a brand new client, and how do I encapsulate, how do I build out the account strategy so that I've got the right kind of blast radius for workloads that don't go right. I can actually manage my financials, I can manage my security. All those best practices have been templatized and are available, and actually they make a real difference in delivery and transitioning. We're able to deliver to new customers in really rapid order, and actually a lot of that is the encapsulation of knowledge. And again, we've been able to put those accelerators together, whether or not we're talking about managing financials, optimizing our security and compliance, the basic things like service management. But as we get into more advanced things like our advisory services, and also building cloud native solutions, a lot of those templates and best practices are being harvested as actually corporate assets to be reused. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that this is just for Unisys' benefit. It also means that we're able to promulgate that and actually leverage it in our customer environments. Tomorrow, actually, we're going to have a conversation, and absolutely, I'm not going to take credit for some of the great work being done at our customers, but we're able to influence. Because we understand and have kind of a keen awareness of the importance of the role of people and the role of executive buy-in and how that needs to manifest before actually you can drive large-scale adoption. If you come to our session tomorrow, you'll actually see some great examples where that executive commitment and the organizational commitment to cloud adoption is actually making a real difference to some of our federal and state and local government customers. So last thing I just kind of just promote here within Unisys, the Cloud Forte is our go-to-market brand. It's become everything for cloud for us, and really all kind of tees off of this notion of building a workforce and actually training a next-gen workforce to be masters to lead cloud adoption as opposed to be victims of it. And actually within the systems integrator, being able to templatize and capture knowledge as reusable templates has been absolutely critical. Being able to kind of, and actually there's lots of ways to organize a systems integrator, and actually some of you who've been there will know what I mean. There's horizontal and there's vertical models. Actually, the model that we've been able to come up with is having this core team and being able to deploy members of the core team, being able to deploy knowledge and artifacts of the core team out to the edges, have those templates be used in real life and improved to kind of build a virtuous cycle has been absolutely critical. And the last point I would actually kind of foot stomp is this army of cloud practitioners. It is absolutely critical to get your folks trained and certified. And actually what we found is on some of our major programs, you can see a tipping point on programs. And actually a lot of it has to do with the blend of training and certification and access to expertise and access to these templates. You can see people go from kind of legacy waterfall data center thinking to cloud native thinking. And actually it's a magical thing to watch, you know, some of these folks who actually, it's almost like, I've seen folks who actually have had 10 years come off their careers and actually get that much more excited because it doesn't, like work doesn't have to be the drudgery of waterfall and actually having to wait for a change control board and having to wait for, you know, environments to be built out. They actually can solve problems that they've always wanted to solve at a rate that they wanted to solve them. So I think that's it for me. I want to just turn it back over to Rigo.
Thanks, Peter. All right, so we've talked a lot about, you know, Cloud Center of Excellence or Cloud Center of Enablement, right? So when you go home today and send out that email, hey, I want to get started, right? This is how you get started. First of all, and this kind of goes back to, you know, this cloud culture starts at the top. Well, you need a sponsor, right? You need a sponsor for your CCOE. And it's not just a name on the paper, right? It's actually someone that's going to remain active and visible, right? That's going to help you, help your CCOE, you know, move forward. It's going to be well-versed in cloud and is going to be able to communicate the value, right? It's going to be able to obtain resources, whether it's people, tools, funding, right, to enable and empower the CCOE. And just like Peter mentioned, it's going to recognize successes and failures, right? It's going to provide direction, and it's going to remove blockers. So let me give you this scenario, right? And in this diagram, in this organization, right, the colors representing green being someone that's very aware, well-versed in the cloud, red being kind of the opposite end, right? Not very aware, maybe a little uncertain, right? And yellow, kind of something in between. So when we say that the cloud culture starts at the top, does it have to be all the way at the top? How about this guy, right? He has a direct relationship with one of his direct reports, and he can take the time to help him become aware of the value, what's in it for him, right? Because there's two levels of change, organizational change and individual change, right? He also has a kind of an east-west or lateral relationship with his peer, right? And if the cloud adoption is impacting all of this organization, then this guy might be the right guy, right? Now, what happens if the organization and the cloud adoption is going to impact an organization this big? Maybe he's still the right guy, right? But he could have a little bit of a more difficult time influencing the rest of the organization, right? For resources, you know, adoption, whatever it is. So again, you know, we have to evaluate, you know, who's the best sponsor that has all these characteristics, right? That's going to help us adopt the benefits of the cloud. So when we look at how do we build the Cloud Center of Excellence, right? And I would actually say one of the reasons I left the framework on the top right-hand side is you can put your CCOE through this framework, right? So when you build a team, you're building an offering for your organization. What are they supposed to do, right? So you have to define what business value your CCOE is going to bring to your organization, and then you're going to select or hire those individuals that will be able to fulfill that value, right? You're going to ramp up the team. If this team is going to lead the rest of your organization through cloud, then they have to be well-versed in cloud. So they need knowledge. They also need experience. Oops. they also need experience, right? So they need to pilot a few projects, they need to get their hands dirty, right? How many of you would hire someone to lead your cloud strategy that only has an AWS certification but that's never touched the console? Yeah, so you have the same thing, right? Internally, they have to have the experience to help you lead that journey. And then from an operational excellence, they can help set standards, right? Both from an architecture, design standpoint, as well as operational standpoint. So really, what I'm asking you guys is to think a little different, right? You have the influence to change your organization's DNA, right? With cloud, you may be changing the way we do things around here, right? So it may feel a little bit different. And this is, again, why the cloud culture starts at the top, because it's going to influence the people that are in your organization, right? And that's to realize the business drivers that we touched on earlier. If we say we want to go to market faster, well, we have to go from these long processes, and failure is not an option, to prototyping, trying new things, so we can get to market faster, right? If we want to empower the edge and the builders and the developers to build the great, awesome, new applications, then we perhaps need to go from a command and control to a decentralized model with the proper cloud guardrails that your CCOE is going to help you enable. Same thing with DevOps, right? Rather than going through, kind of silos, throwing it over the wall. I mean, if you look at the definition of DevOps, it's not just the tools. It's also the cultural philosophy and the processes of it, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Building versus, infrastructure as code, redeploying every time, the long due diligence to adopting early and often. So in summary, again, think differently. And just kind of one last plug here. One way that we're thinking a little bit differently about, traditional classroom-based, experience for machine learning is through Deep Racer, right? Deep Racer, it's a scaled-down version of a race car, right? And it's kind of a fun way to get started with machine learning, and more specifically, with reinforcement learning, right? So it's thinking a little bit different about the education process for this, for this topic, right? Second, build your foundation. Your foundation is your CCOE, right? This is the team that's going to help you, do the groundwork for your change. And think DevOps for your strategy. Make sure you have that kind of long-term strategy, and then iterate, right? Use this framework continuously and proactively, seek out what activities do I need to do to get in front of that, next requirement. So with that said, I appreciate the time. We're going to be outside, and as well as the partner team, and enjoy the rest of your conference.